Hello and welcome to this video on Cubasis. This is version 2.3, and in this tutorial video I would like to show you some of the new features we have in store for you and also show you how to actually use them. So you can follow along if you like. If you want to, please create a new Smear demo project. Just give it a name and then tap OK, and that's our starting point for today. Now, I'm not gonna even try and hold back, because the biggest news for Cubasis 2.3 is, of course, that we now have Waves plugins inside of Cubasis on your iPad. Yes, you heard right, it's Waves. And it's exclusive to Cubasis. Waves is celebrating their 25th anniversary, and we're very happy to be able to have this great collaboration with them to bring you some of their excellent effect processors right into Cubasis. You can find them as an in-app purchase in Cubasis. There are 3 of them, or you go for the Waves plugin bundle, which will include all 3. Now let's actually put them to some use. The first track I want to work on is the bass track. So please select it. And for now, disable the Studio EQ and the compressor, which are already on there. Then tap on where it says Tap to add effect. And choose Waves. And then Waves audio track. That's the first processor we're going to have a look at. This is it. On the left-hand side, you can see an area which contains the EQ section. Then further to the right, you can see the blue gate section, which is followed by the yellow compressor section. And we have both an input and output gain, which are great for gain staging. Now let's have a look at the small toolbar at the top of this window. The first option you see there is the precision switch. This will enable double precision for the Waves audio track if it's set to ×2, which equals 64-bit internal processing. Next to that, you will find an undo and a redo button. So whatever changes you do in the plugin, you can always go back and undo them or redo them if you were happy with them in the first place. Next to that, you have something that says Setup A right now. You can just tap on it and switch to a Setup B. And this is great for A being different settings on this plugin. So, for example, if I change the threshold and then switch over to Setup B, it will have the original value. If I'm happy with my settings but want to try like a different version, I can just copy the settings from A to B by tapping on the button and then switch to Setup B, change it slightly, and then again AB to compare those 2 settings. Now I'm going to jump ahead just a little bit. These are the settings I made for the bass track. And I would like to use those settings to explain a little bit more how this plugin works. So on the left-hand side in the EQ section, you can see that there are 4 bands, and you can simply tap on any of the numbers to select this particular band. As you can see, they are all color-coded, so you instantly know which parameters of which band you're actually tweaking. In the lower left-hand corner, there's an on-off button which will enable or disable this band. And next to that, there's a toggle. You can simply tap on it to go through all 4 bands. And by now you've probably also noticed that each band has different types. Starting at the left, we have a low cut or high pass, whichever you prefer. Then we have a low shelve. Next to that, a bell. And finally, a high shelve. I'm using the low cut. If I switch to, for example, band 2, you can see that the amount of types you have per band varies. The other controls you have are gain, frequency, and the Q, and I think they're pretty self-explanatory. That's the EQ section done. Now let's have a look at the dynamics. First, we have the gate section. I'm not using the gate for the bass. But it will be very useful when you have live recordings, for example, of instruments, and you have a certain amount of noise that's going on there. You simply set the threshold to a value where the gate will then close. And you also have other options, for example, the floor setting, which if you set it to -infinity will just completely mute the audio. And if you set it to any value higher than that, there will be still some signal audible even when the gate is closed. And of course, you have an attack and release parameter. I'm actually using the compressor on the bass track, so let's listen to what it sounds like. Okay, now I'm gonna turn it off and turn it back on. On the gain reduction meter, you can see that the compressor is actually working right now. Now there's one more thing I would like to show you on the audio track. It's a special feature of the compressor. And to do so, please have a look at the ratio. Now, you all know positive ratio values that you find on most compressors, but this one also goes to values below 1, up to 0.5 of a ratio, which is the same as a ratio of 1 to 2. What this means is that, for example, if the signal goes 1 dB above the threshold that you set at the input of the compressor, then on the output it will be 2 dB above the threshold. And that's a very useful feature. This is called upward expansion. It comes in handy, for example, when you're dealing with overcompressed recorded tracks. All right, the next track I would like to work on is the lead guitar track. Please select it and then again disable the Studio Cue and the compressor. Then go ahead and add another Waves audio track. I've already set it up, so let's listen to the track first without the audio track. And now I'm gonna turn it on. By now you might have noticed that there's a preset button on the left-hand side. So go ahead and tap it. And here you can recall a lot of presets that already come shipped with the Waves plugins. You can simply tap on them. You can see all the different settings that have been made there. You can also hit full audio track reset if you ever get stuck somewhere. You can also save your own presets, and that's also new to Cubasis 2.3. So simply tap on save, give it a name, and then it will be stored and you can recall it in any other project or on any other track. This preset storage system also works for the built-in Cubasis effects. So, for example, the compressor now comes shipped with factory presets. Actually, we included over 200 presets for the built-in effects, and we added 70 for the Effects Pack 1 and 2 effects. All right, coming back to the Waves plugins. And what I would like you to do is duplicate this track. So simply tap on the duplicate button at the bottom of the screen. This will give you a second AM Snare Kit track, track number 2. And on this track, please go ahead and disable the compressor. And you might have guessed it, we will add another Waves audio track on track number 2. What we want to do on this track is heavily compress or crush this drum sound, not to be listened to individually, but to mix it with the first drum track. Now let's go ahead and do that. These are the settings I have chosen. Of course, feel free to adjust them to your taste. The important thing here is have a look at the compressor. The ratio is at the maximum value. And also, the tag and release times are also at the shortest value that you can set there. The threshold is set rather low, as you will see and hear in just a few moments. On the left-hand side, you can see that I've used a low cut to get rid of some of the low-frequency content that I don't want to have twice in the combined drum signal, and also a dip in the high-frequency range. Now let's listen to this track solo. You will hear that it will sound rather squashed, but it's not supposed to be listened to individually. But of course, even that is of course up to taste. Now let's listen to both tracks together. So we're going to listen to the heavily compressed signal in combination with the first drum track, the original drum sound. This is what it sounds like. On drum track 1, I would now like to add another Waves plugin, which is the Q10. The Q10 is a 10-band paragraphic equalizer. It also features very high values for the Q, which means you can do very narrow or surgical changes to the frequency spectrum. There's yet another feature I would like to highlight on the Q10. Have a look at the types. We have, of course, a bell, we have a low shelf, and a low cut, and a high shelf, and a high cut. And there's another type, and this one is called proportional. What it essentially means is that the gain and Q settings of this band will interact with each other. These are the settings I've made for the first drum track. Let's have a look at band number 8. I've set it to proportional. Now look at what happens when I change the gain. It's starting with a very broad bandwidth or a low Q, and the more I up the gain, the smaller or the narrower this band becomes. And of course, it also works like this for negative gain values. So again, it's starting very broad, and the lower the gain, the narrower the band becomes. This can lead to very pleasing sonic results, so I definitely recommend that you try it. Now it's time to have a look at another track, this time the piano track. Please select it, and again, disable Studio Q and compressor, and of course, you have guessed it, add another Waves audio track. These are the settings I've made. Now let's just listen to what it sounds like. Let me just solo this track. Now on its own, this track sounds very thin, but of course we're not mixing for individual tracks, we're mixing for the complete mix. Now the slight issue I have with this setting right now is that the piano sounds very thin at the beginning of the song when it's playing basically on its own. It would be nice if there was an option to have the original sound back at the beginning of the song. And thanks to Cubasis 2.3, there is now an easy option to do that. We're going to use automation. Now, automation has been in Cubasis before, but we have now extended it to be used with audio units as well. So you can use it with the Waves plugins, but also with any other audio units that you can use in Cubasis. What we want to automate now is the Waves audio track, and we want to automate a specific parameter, which is on band 1 of the EQ, the on-off switch. We want it to be turned on at the right point in time in the song. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to right enable the Waves audio track, press the play button, not the record button, to record automation, and then simply at around bar 9, actually the beginning of bar 9, enable band 1 of the EQ. Here we go. Now you can simply turn off the write button on the Waves audio track and leave the read button turned on. And when you now tap to go back to the beginning of the project, you will see that band 1 is now turned off. And if you tap anywhere after bar 9, then you will see that, of course, it is turned on. Now it's time to finalize our mix and finish this video, and it's a good opportunity to show you the last of the Waves plugins. Open up the mixer and on the stereo out, disable Studio Q compressor and brick wall limiter, then tap to add effect and choose Waves, and this time the Waves L1 Ultra Maximizer. Here it is. Let's start on the left-hand side. You of course have an input gain stage, so you can do separate settings for left and right, or of course for both at the same time. You have a threshold setting above the threshold, then the limiting will actually start. We have an out ceiling, which determines the upper limit of the level of this mix, and we have a release parameter, which you can adjust manually, but there's also an automatic mode. Simply turn on auto release, and then the L1 will measure peak and RMS values and adjust the release time according to the musical signal. The L1 has a look-ahead function, which means it will introduce 64 to 96 samples of latency. That's why I would recommend that you add it once you've done all your recordings and you're in the mixing phase of your project. There's a gain reduction meter, which you already know, for example, from the compressor of the Waves audio track. And there are settings if you, for example, were to export your mix down to 16-bit, you could make use of the quantized dithering and noise shaping algorithms of the Waves L1. For now, we're just going to turn everything off. You can see that the IDR is now also off. IDR stands for Increased Digital Resolution. However, I would like you to switch the domain from digital to true peak to make sure that even intersample clips are detected by the L1, which can be particularly important if you have, for example, a very hot mix and you will later then convert this to, say, MP3 or AAC. You can be sure that it will not clip on your consumer system. A very useful feature on the L1 is the link button between the threshold and the out ceiling. It's actually a button that I already liked on the original L1 plugin. What you can do here is adjust threshold and out ceiling at the same time. And the way you do that, you press play on your project and then use the link button to change those values until you hear limiting artifacts that you don't like. I've settled on a value around -4 for the threshold because the mix will get even hotter later. Now we can bring up the out ceiling to any value that you like, and now we have a louder mix. and back on again. I would like to finish this video by telling you that we also did a lot of work in the background, a lot of improvements and fixes, especially for example audio units should work now even better and more stable in Cubasis than they have done before. I hope you like this update. Again, I think it's great that Waves collaborated with us to bring those excellent plugins into Cubasis on your iPad. If you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. That's it for now. Thank you for watching, and above all, have fun making music. Bye.